Good morning. It's historic, no doubt about it. And politically, it's an earthquake. It really is. And just looking through the political lens, as we often do in Washington, does this have an effect, big effect, on the election coming up? You know, perhaps on some races around the edges, Democrats will try to rally the base on this issue alone. But I think the biggest message it sends is that elections have consequences. And the Supreme Court and putting those justices on the Supreme Court really changes the fabric of our country. Now, what was said already is important to remember, which is this is not outlawing abortion across the nation. This is not the end of abortion across the nation. In a state that rules or has laws that protect it, that's still available. But there are a number of states that had legislation ready to go for this very day. So it will have an impact around the country. It'll have an impact in politics. And I think it's, it's fair to say it's an historic day.
Yeah, Bret, there's no doubt about that. The political implications will be weighed in time. There are other pressures on the American people right now that may decide these midterms, including the economy, inflation, gas prices, et cetera. All that will be sussed out in the months to come. Bret, stand by one moment. I'm going to get back to Andy McCarthy here. Andy, when you think about the composition of the courts, and you think about the significance of this ruling, and you go back some 10 years to Obamacare, many people thought a decision such as Dobbs would be held to the very end of the session. It wasn't. Does that suggest anything to you at all?
Well, no, I think they're dealing here, Bill, with competing tensions. On the one hand, the fact that this got leaked 7 weeks ago does create some pressure on the court to get the decision out the door so that it neither happens nor appears to happen that the outside pressure worked on the justices. At the same time, it does ratchet up security concerns about the justices and their families. So that's another factor that pushes them in the direction of getting it out when it was ready to go. I actually thought that it would be in the last batch, and I don't even know if today will be the last batch or not. 9 would be an awful lot for them to get through in one day. But I just think that, I thought the court handled this from top to bottom in a very professional way. I hoped that they would get the decision out quickly, but once they didn't, I think they were trying to show a stiff-spine determination that they were going to do their work. They were going to do the kind of caliber work, not only that the Supreme Court characteristically does, but that is demanded by this moment. And when it was ready to go, they let it go.
Yeah. One thing that will be very interesting, I think, Dana, is the opinion that's been released. How different is it from the opinion that was leaked back in
on another network, and I'm just getting this from Twitter, so I won't. They suggest that the majority opinion is virtually identical to the one that was leaked. So we have that. Jonathan, can I ask you about security for the justices and their families, because we've had you on air to talk about that. I know that you had talked to other judges as well, and their concerns about it. We know that there have been ongoing protests outside of a few of the justices' homes over the last 50 days. There's never been an arrest of any of the protesters, even though it is against the law to do so, to protest in front of their homes. The Congress was just recently passed the bill in order to get them more security. Do you know anything about what planning there is right now to deal with the aftermath? As you can see, there's a ton of passion there on both sides, but the angry people from Jane's Revenge, it's in the name. It's in the name, Jonathan.
Well, when people are calling for a day of rage, reason will be a stranger. And that's what we're already seeing. People feel very passionately, but there's some that can take that to violent ends. So I expect they're going to be ramping up security. In terms of federal law, now that the opinion's out, it's actually more difficult to use the law, because the law was designed to allow the arrest of people who are trying to influence a pending proceeding or matter with the court. This is no longer pending. So if anything, it's going to be less likely to arrest just for the act of protest. But I think that now law enforcement is going to really be acutely aware that there are people who are likely to lose reason, lose restraint, and could well become violent. And so I expect that they will ramp up that security.
Okay, Jonathan, stand by one moment. We did not know, Dana, how Chief Justice Roberts planned to vote based on the leaked memo. Well, we have his answer today. And you wonder about the composition of the court 10, 12 years ago when I mentioned Obamacare, how he sided with the liberal justices to keep that law intact. Today, he does not necessarily have the air cover of all those votes. And Justice Roberts, Andy McCarthy, I think you were talking about this the other day. Justice Roberts can now, well, he's free up to vote and pick a side in a way that he did not before. Just explain that to our audience as you see it.
Well, Bill, I think that, when Chief Justice Roberts, not only in his first among equals role as the Chief Justice, but also when he was kind of the swing justice or one of the swing justices on a 5-4 court, he was in a better position not only to deflect cases that he would prefer the court not to take because they were too hot potato type, but also even within the framework of the cases that the court took, he was able to narrow the issues that the court would resolve. In a 6-3 split rather than a 5-4 split, he's got much less control. It takes only 4 votes for the court to accept a case, but obviously you don't take a case if you're a justice who wants to take it unless you think you can get the 5 to win. So now, when there are 5 other conservative justices besides Justice Roberts, he's not in a position to sort of bargain his vote and use that as leverage to deflect cases that he'd rather not see the court take. They have much more freedom to take cases whether he wants to take them or not.
Wow, very interesting analysis there.
I just want to maybe ask Bret Baier quickly, just to reflect on one thing. Think about Mitch McConnell's decision to not have a hearing for Merrick Garland, the Supreme Court nominee of Barack Obama that he wanted to put forward. I mean, that is, if you look back and you want to see a series of events that leads to today, that was a really interesting decision back then, and it's having a big impact today.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dana. That had a massive impact at the ability for President Trump to fill the seats that enable this vote to happen. And that's what I was talking about earlier about political consequences. You could do the opposite, and it hasn't adjusted the court. But when the Senate races in Georgia both flipped to Democrat in that runoff, that changed the dynamic as well. So what we see is implications of political moments. And the Merrick Garland situation, what McConnell did, he has it as a badge of courage and says it's one of the smartest things he thinks he ever did. Obviously, Democratic leaders think it's one of the worst. This is going to be fascinating to watch because there'll be another push to get rid of the filibuster, to try to get Democrats, while they have control, to have some piece of legislation that counters this ruling.